Jumpin In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello.
Good evening.
And welcome. And yes, hello once again, Friday night here on Manx Radio, Jumping In with Chris and myself, H, and a bit of a special for you this week as we head over to Rotterdam to give you a flavour of the North Sea Jazz Festival.
Yes, hello and willkommen to this week's show. Can you believe it, another special edition? Of course, we hope for regular listeners of Jumping In that every edition is special, but this one even more so as we give you a taste of that giant jamboree that is the North Sea Jazz Festival. What it was actually like for first-time attendees like ourselves, spoiler alert, it was amazing but somewhat overwhelming at times, as well you might expect, with 18 stages and around 90,000 fans attending over the weekend. So H, what was your tip for the top? And I don't mean wearing comfy shoes.
There was too much to choose from, really. It could go anywhere. I mean, Tamika Reid, Mary Halverson, Leo Wadada Smith, Pat Metheny was there playing a couple of gigs. I mean, I can't choose a favourite, but I'll give you a few samples in any case. And yeah, Tamika, really enjoyed that.
And for me, I'm a loss for words. I'm a little unsteady, ready to lift off and to get things rolling. I decided to catch up with Snarky Puppy and the Metropole Orchestra, which saw over 80 musicians off the stage and around 12,000 in the audience. And to give you some idea how big a room that is, think 7.5 Villa Marina Royal Halls. Here's Waves Upon Waves. Snarky Puppy with Waves Upon Waves, which they treated us to what could only be described as a spectacular opening set, playing the whole of their recent release Somni to an enthusiastic crowd like you can hear there, all ready for a packed programme over 3 days at the humongous Ahoy Centre in Rotterdam.
Yeah, it is humongous, and particularly so if you come straight from one of the smaller venues, Yenisei, which was the first gig I went to see Tamika Reed with her quartet. Third level, I think it was, and looks a bit like a jazz club. Long, low room, low ceiling, maybe 300 or 400 people in there. Caught Tamika Reed and then went straight down to the Ahoy and like a down level, sort of, along a corridor, in through another door and into this vast arena where Snarky Puppy, I caught their last couple of tracks, and the very last number they did I thought was an absolute cracker. Really enjoyed that one. Pretty loud, it has to be said. Tamika Reed, wonderful. I wanted to go and see that. I mean, Tamika Reed, the crossover cellist with her band, including the wonderful Mary Halverson, who's one of the big draws for me, and I've been wanting to see Mary play live for quite some time. Ditto, always been a bit of a fan of Thomas Fujiwara on the drums, and also Jason Rybke on bass, and he also plays sort of cassette, little sort of samples from cassette as well. Fascinating set this, really enjoyed it to start off the weekend for me, and this is a track from their latest album called Dance, Skip, Hop, and this is called Oolong. Tamika Reed Quartet, and they play basically music from this album. It's just come out, Dance Hip. I can't even say it. Dance, skip, hop, not dance, hip, scop. Dance, skip, hop. They played music from this album and a bit more as well, I think. Tamika on cello, and again, real crossover. She sometimes sounds rocky, sometimes sounds quite sort of classical, sometimes does make it swing indeed and sound more sort of jazzy. A great player, and she's a good talker as well. It seemed really nice. No chance for interviews, unfortunately, because the turnover is so rapid that the second they've finished, they have a really tight schedule because there's another band coming on virtually within the next half an hour. So as soon as they leave the stage, the roadies and the sound guys are on, and girls as well, to strip it off and set up for the next set. Tamika Reed on cello, yeah. Mary Halverson, great sound on guitar, and she was also playing as well, I think, an added set with Wadada Leo Smith because Vijay Iyer was unwell, so she stood in, and I went to that as well, thoroughly enjoyed that. Thomas Fujiwara, an understated drummer, and again uses a bit of electronics, and a fascinating drummer, really like him, and Jason Rubke on bass and cassette, and I queued up for it, so I did have a little chat briefly with Tamika and just on the stage, and they were actually doing the merch, doing the, as she says, we got the merch, which was basically CDs in this case, and some vinyl as well. I got the last CD she had, which was good news because she was undercutting the record shop, which was on the site as well. Terrific stuff, great way to start off.
Fantastic way to start off. Now, next up for me, again, a great set, more reflective, although still blowing, from sax star Joshua Redman, who for his second release for Blue Note Records this time focused on the quartet as a compositional unit, and with the new quartet was thrown together really quickly to proceed a world tour. He was so impressed with how the band gelled together so speedily, he took them in the studio and recorded in advance of going on the road. From his 2025 album Words Fall Short, here's A Message to Unsend. a message to unsend from Joshua Redman with an all-new quartet who were entirely connected after several months on the road. Paul Cornish on piano, Philip Norris on bass, Nazia Ebo at the drums, as well as on the album guest appearances from Melissa Aldana on sax, Skylar Tang on trumpet, and the vocalist Gabrielle Casava from Joshua's previous album features just on one track on this album. And of course the maestro Joshua Redmond on sax, playing to a capacity crowd, and the album is Words Fall Short.
Great stuff. You're listening to Jumping In with Chris and myself, H, and a little roundup for you, a taster, if you will, of this year's 2026 North Sea Jazz Festival in Rotterdam. The biggest jazz festival, I think, in Europe. I don't know whether it's the biggest in the world, but it must be getting close. I think something like 90,000 people over the weekend in this huge venue in Rotterdam. So once you're in, as it were. There's no pass-outs. You get in and everything's there. All things jazz and everything in between. And there's exhibitions and food stalls. And yeah, you get the picture. Proper festival stuff. Like I said, I started out with Tamika Reed, Gonzalo Rubalcaba and Chris Potter. That was great stuff as well. James Brandon Lewis was rammed out. I watched a bit of it. Couldn't get into that. It was so busy. Cracking set from all accounts, which the boys saw. I just saw a little bit from outside, but gave up eventually and went over to Wadada Leo Smith and Mary Halverson, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And then a man we haven't seen for quite some time, Anouar Brahem with Django Bates, who of course is based, I think, mostly in Copenhagen now. Anouar Brahem, the oud player, and a really laid-back set, but quite enjoyable if you just wanted to sort of reset after something a bit more frenetic like the James Brandon Lewis. And I thought we'd hear, a bit of the album, the great album Nisi Emmy did in 2017, Blue Mackham's Anouar Brahem on oud, Django Bates again on piano. I think it's just the two of them on this track, and also on the album Dave Holland bass and the late great Jack Durnett on drums. And this is from that album, La Passante. Very restful stuff, isn't it? Yeah, great. La Passant, Django Bates on piano, and Anouar Brahim on oud. And again, the Django and Anouar, not with Dave Holland in this particular instance, although Dave's still going, of course, Jack no longer with us, but at the North Sea Jazz, it was with Anja Lechner on cello and Mats Alletsen on a bass, and still very restful. And it was we were just saying as we were listening to that, I mean, how they program it, I'm assuming the bigger names like Pat Metheny they put into and Snarky into the massive venues. Anouar Brahim was in a pretty sizable venue, which you thought, and we were saying, for that type of music, it was all laid back and lots of sort of arpeggio sort of or arpeggiated sort of runs, and very laid back playing from Django as we heard there on the set at the North Sea Jazz. So it was a strange venue for it. Didn't make it any less enjoyable. You just thought perhaps in a closer acoustic it might have been more effective. But again, I don't know, it'd be fascinating to find out and talk to the people who program it, how that works. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed that one as well, and a bit of a laid back one after some of the frenetic music coming from the likes of Snarky and James Brandon Lewis.
And how do you program something like that? Pat Metheny, as you said, made 2 attendances, one with a reinvention of Bright-Sized Life, is one of his very first albums, but with an orchestra with it. Looking out to see whether that comes to fruition or not. There was also a fantastic trio set from Xavi Torres trio, which I didn't really know much about, with Miguel Zenon, and they've played together. I researched a little bit, looking back over several years, but they are planning a new release coming out in the autumn, worth watching out for. One that I couldn't catch the entire set of, which is often the way at this sort of festival, but I was delighted to catch at least part of. Excellent set from the New Art Orchestra, led by saxophonist Marieke van Dijk, playing through material from their debut album, which I've had for a while, and I love, the Tivoli Sessions #1. Here's Balancing Act. Lovely stuff indeed. The new orchestra with the balancing act. Leader Marique was very keen to point out that what made this band different. She said, firstly, the majority of the band are women, which is unusual in jazz. It's getting less unusual, I'm glad to say, but certainly not that many big bands that are predominantly women. And the collective was an improvising unit based with compositional duties shared amongst the band. And the track we just heard was written by Suzanne Venman, trumpeter, for her trombonist brother Vincent, and we heard solos from both of them. It's a great modern band, and in fact they've been awarded a 3-year residency at Tivoli Vredenburg in the Netherlands, so I'm sure there'll be more to come from them. And the band also included some great names such as Tineke Postuma on sax and Nabhu Kleerhut, both leaders in their own right on trombone.
Yeah, terrific sound, and great to hear the big band still alive and well. And there were several big bands. We were just mentioning that. You've heard a couple of them already, and we also had in some of these larger venues, we had, which you just mentioned, Bright Size Life reimagined. So Pat was there, Pat Metheny with Tin Weibinger and the Brain Teaser Orchestra. Apologies if that's the wrong pronunciation. Dutch isn't a strong point, but it was a wonderful idea. And Pat sort of came on to say, he didn't say a great deal, but he said, oh, well, he'd been playing there for years off and on at the North Sea Jazz. And he said the organiser, whose name eludes me at the moment, but it's been the same woman for quite a few years who puts the programme together. I imagine she started for next year already. Sort of phoned him up and said, do you realise it's 50 years since you recorded your seminal album on ECM? And I think one of the very first things he recorded, which was Bright Size Life, with the late Jaco Pastorius on bass and Bob Moses, still going, I'm glad to say, on drums. And Pat sort of said, well, he didn't like to think about it. When he looked, he said, oh my Lord, yeah, it is 50 years since then. So she said, what about for a project, sort of doing something to reimagine that album? And so they teamed up with Tin and the Brain Teaser Orchestra and came up with the evening's entertainment we saw. Cracking seats as well, courtesy of our Luxembourg's better half, reserving seats pretty much on the front row or second row. I think we were wonderful, really close to the stage, really close to seeing Pat and the orchestra there. A great band. To the best of my knowledge, it's not been recorded yet, that. I like to hope it might be, but you know what it's like these days. Very expensive, but keep your eyes open on the web. You never know, things might appear on Bandcamp or such like. In the meantime, we'll have to put up, if that's the right word, with the original, still sounding as fresh as paint. 50 years on, 1976 it came out in ECM. Pat Metheny, Bright Side Life, and this is Unquity Road.
Hi, this is Maria Schneider, and you're listening to Jumpin' In with H and Chris on Manx Radio.
Ah, there you go. The Chris Davis Trio with Robert Hurst and the great Jonathan Blake on the drums. Lost in Geneva, recorded in September of 2025. And Chris Davis was indeed playing there as well with that trio. Wonderful. I really enjoyed that set very much. And we did have a chat with her afterwards. And she signed the CD, and hopefully through our friend Anne Braithwaite, we will have a chat with Chris. I've asked to see if we can get in contact with her. And she said, give Anne a shout. I'd be happy to have a chat when I get back to the States about her music. Always something interesting, different from this wonderful Canadian pianist, and I just love Jonathan Blake's playing as well on the drums. He's a big man and he doesn't move his arms that much, but my word, he's amazing around the kit. We heard Maria Schneider just saying hello there, and she indeed was also playing there with the classic jazz big band and Antonio Lozana. A little bit too much on the vocals for me on that. I mean, that's personal choice. He's obviously a good singer and he sang on a lot of numbers, and I could have done with less of the vocals, and that's not to decry his talent, but I sort of like just the big band and some of the orchestrations I really love from Maria's stuff. Thoroughly enjoyed that one. And then, yes, before that we did indeed have Unquity Road with Pat Metheny. Who else was playing? Niels Potter Molver was there. Did get to see him for a while, quite loud. Bill Frisell, didn't get to see him at all, unfortunately. Maria, we enjoyed. Julia Horstman, caught a little bit of that. Charles Lloyd, Fred Hurst Trio, got to see him. I've always been wanting to see Fred. And our own Emma Ravitz was there, but I didn't get to see that at all.
No, more jazz than you could shake a stick at, and fantastic it was too. Yeah, the vocals were kind of flamenco, which without the dancing just sounded a bit pained, but he was a very good sax player. Well, sadly, we could only cram so much into one show, and we've only scratched the surface of this fantastic experience of North Sea Jazz Festival. I hope we've given you a taste of the variety of the talent on show, and we just got time for a track from the diminutive keyboard powerhouse that is Hiromi with her band Sonic Wonder. Playing a repertoire from their recent release Out There, here's the first movement of the title suite, Taking Off. See you soon.
Do we go next year?
Yeah, I don't see why not.